Good afternoon and welcome to a Celtic State of Mind. It's Thursday, which means I'm joined by JP Mason. I'm obviously not Paul John Dykes. Paul John is off conducting very important secretive Axom business, meaning he's at a meeting that we don't know anything about, but hopefully he'll maybe have something to tell us over the next few shows. So you are stuck with me for today, but as I said, I'm supported by the very able JP, the king of King Tuts, as I like to call him.
Let's not talk about music.
Yeah.
Well, annoyed about it. So yeah.
You say that, right? You say that, but I've been laughing at the comments that have been coming in, and I've got to bring this up. And this came in from the Urban Culture, which was Grease was a great movie, but very corny looking now. Discuss. Which I don't think I've ever seen that. But the funny thing is, and I'm starting to get a little bit paranoid now that people are listening, Grease is not only my wife's favourite film, but we actually just watched it the other week, watched it back. And there's a running joke between my daughter. My daughter's, just recently turned 20, but there's been a running joke for years between her and all her pals. And they used to call me Grease Lightning because I used to, probably because of the hair and, I'm a bit of a 1950s throwback. And as I was just thinking about that, let's see if I can find this. Then the Urban Culture again jumps in and says, our own Chris. Now, this is probably before Urban knew I was coming on to host this. Our own Chris would easily get a walk-on part in Happy Days or Grease. So I don't know if there's ever been a start like that on Axom, but yeah, that resonated a little bit with me.
I agree. I think you could rock a leather jacket and with it. Is it the T-Birds? Is that?
Yes, the T-Birds. Yeah. But unreal. So I do like my 50s music, so I'd fit right in. I have to admit.
Excuse me 1 second. I just need to close a door. Give me 2 seconds.
Go ahead. What I'll do is I'll bring up some of the comments. I mean, we are going to try and talk a little bit, guys, about the football, obviously at the weekend, but there's lots of stuff obviously happening off the park. Just to set the scene up front straight away, there hasn't been any release of the minutes yet. So unfortunately, myself and JP will not really be able to dive too much into the content of the meeting that occurred earlier this week that Paul John did attend. What Paul John has shared is some of his impressions of the personnel that were at the meeting, which he's obviously shared on here and has been discussed. And he's also given some thoughts into what the potential next stages are. And we've had a couple of people on from the collective this week as well to talk about their thoughts. So I'll give some of my impressions on how things are going. JP will get your impressions first as well. But what we'll cover off first of all, JP, you were at the match at the weekend against Motherwell. Good performance, good win. I say good result. I mean, depends on the performance vary. First match I was able to get to in person this season. I was lucky enough to get a couple of tickets for me and my old man. Got to give a shout out to the Parkhead Bowling Club, which allowed us to go in there for a wee pre-match Guinness. Mine was a non-alcoholic because I was a driver. It's just next to Rab Hawes. Do you know where Rab Hawes is? Just the things at the Jockstein stand side.
I didn't know. I thought Rab Hawes was in the Merchant City. Is there two different?
Well, there's one there. I think it's Rab Hawes. I think it's called actually.
Right, okay.
But we eat there, but it's just out of the way. But we were allowed to go in there because we'd managed to borrow a couple of season tickets off family members. So really grateful for their hospitality. It was nice to be in there and met a few folks, a couple of Axom viewers as well, which was nice. But great to be back at the stadium to actually watch a match and not for a press conference for any other reason. My thoughts, JP, I thought it's always interesting when you're at the games, and you're obviously probably used to this, but you definitely get a different perspective. You can look at different elements of the match, look at different players, sort of identify different incidents throughout the game. And I thought it was quite interesting to watch players like Maeda, for example, who has come under a bit of scrutiny. See how players like Tunekte, for example, are adapting, and also I'll look at guys like Sarachi as well coming in for the start. What were your impressions of the performance and the result first of all?
Well, I definitely approached the game with a bit of trepidation, given the fact that our Motherwell not unbeaten, or prior to Sunday anyway, they were unbeaten in something like 14 games, like stretching back to last season. So you got to sort of be impressed by that, and I did watch their game against our nearest and dearest at the start of the season, and I thought they deserved to win that game. And I'm not saying anything out of turn there. I think most of most of their support would have admitted that Motherwell deserved to win that game as well. So, yeah, I was definitely a bit kind of like, are we getting them at the right time for them and the wrong time for us? Especially off the back of a really disappointing result on Thursday last week, which I've obviously not spoken about that either, and I'm still astonished that we didn't get that goal given. It's one of the great injustices that will go along with many others in our Celtic supporting lifetimes. And it also irks me as well that there isn't the UEFA equivalent of the VAR review show with Gordon Duncan and Willie Collum, because I would be very, very keen to have a detailed explanation of why we didn't get that goal. There'll be people that are saying things like, oh, well, it's something to do with the way that it was given and who gave it, and therefore they couldn't prove without any reasonable doubt that it wasn't a handball. And I don't know how many times I've watched it, but I don't see it hitting a hand at all. I mean, in the ground at the time, I was like, okay, that happened really fast. And everyone's kind of like, oh, it's a handball. And then you're waiting 2-3 minutes or however long it seemed to take, 2-3 minutes. And I'm thinking to myself, right, if it's taken this long, then there's obviously a lot of dubiety to it. And I fully was expecting them to give the goal. And then when he didn't give the goal, I was like, right, okay, so must have been a handball then. And then within 5 minutes, guy next to me showed me the incident on his phone, and we're all of us in our section all watching this clip on the phone going, that's not a handball, that hits his head. Like, how on earth is this? How's this happened? And I know we're going over old ground here to in a certain respect, but yeah, coming off that game, I was definitely a little bit anxious about Motherwell and what they would propose. I wasn't surprised to see the way they played. I listened to Stephen Craigan talking about the way that Motherwell played on Sports Sound as I approached the ground, and he was sort of saying to Pat Bonner, he was like, "Well, you know, if you've not seen a lot of Motherwell this season, you as a goalkeeper will have your heart in your mouth at times with the way that they play it about at the back." And obviously, hark back to the McGinn hash of a clearance or pass or whatever it was that it led to the Rangers goal, but and then it played out exactly the way that he said it would, and obviously we pounced on that and gratefully took our opportunity to get level, and then it was about the substitutes and what they brought to the game, and I was really pleased to see the much maligned Arne Engels playing a really, really cute ball through to Balikwisha. Again, much maligned Balikwisha as well, who has the composure to put the ball in for Maeda. And it was almost interesting because a lot of the comment after the Motherwell goal, the not the penalty, but the Motherwell goal, people were like, how good was that ball in? And why do we not whip balls like that in? Because almost like an undefendable goal. Like people maybe will criticise Liam Scales for it, but I think that's quite harsh. I think it was just a really good, right in front of me, really good whipped ball in, and the guy got down well, brave header to go down that low, exactly the same way as it was a brave header by Maeda to go down that low. And again, good to see him celebrating the way that he did, to show that for whatever time left he's at the club, that he'll give everything he can, and he's getting shunted around all over the park at the moment as well. I know that you or I would say we would play anywhere for Celtic, and of course we would, but when it's your preferred position and your potentially your future earnings and salary is dependent on what you do this season, because last season was last season, this season's this season, and whatever clubs are interested in Maeda might not be basing it completely off last season. They'll be looking at this season as well, and obviously he's got the World Cup coming up as well, so you want to do your best in your best position, really. And I can totally respect and appreciate his frustration at not being able to play on the left, where we've now been overloaded with two left wingers because of the mess of the transfer. But apparently the transfer window was okay.
Yes, we're happy with our strategy. We feel it was the right thing to do. I always like Paul John's analogy of the Titanic. there's an iceberg. Well, we think it was the right decision to have the iceberg taped. It's like we stand by our decision to not turn away from the iceberg. I agree with you. I watched Maeda with interest at the game, and there was a couple of things that I observed. And again, it's amazing because I think he played in about 2 or 3 different positions in the one game. As we made the various substitutes, and there was a lot of people around me who were calling for Maeda to be subbed off at certain points in the game. What I did notice about Daizen is that he was getting quite physically outmatched by the Motherwell defender. There were a few times where he was on the ball, he was trying to go around the player, and he was actually getting quite easily balled off the ball. And I know there's been an element of people saying he's checked out, he's not showing the same effort. I didn't really see that because his movement for me was actually pretty good. I just think that he was very well marshalled during the game, and I think the size discrepancy between some of our players and some of the Motherwell players was quite apparent, particularly when you're seeing it in such close range. And actually, there's a few of our players were on end of fairly rough treatment at times. But one of the things that you've rightly pointed out about Daizen Maeda is that he came up trumps when we absolutely needed them. We were into the forward position. And I mean, that wasn't an easy goal to score. It was a fantastic bit of play, the build up, as you say, the ball from Engels, much maligned Engels, then much maligned Balagwisha, and they combined to put in, an absolute, bread and butter on toast cross. It was tremendous. But Maeda's down and he heads it into the net, which was the opposite end of the stadium we were at. So I had to really enjoy it more on the replays because my sight's not as good as it used to be. But what I would say is when that goal went in, the adoration for Daizen Maeda, they're playing the song, the kind of Tequila and the Maeda song, the adoration around me for Maeda from the supporters was incredible. And I think, that must have resonated with him in terms of the way he celebrated as well. But I would say that I felt a little bit for the player because he was getting no purchase really down the right-hand side, getting bundled off the ball a lot. When he kind of went over to the left, sort of similar story, struggled to kind of, get into his groove there, and then obviously had to go up front. So I think it'll be interesting. Hopefully the goal will be a catalyst for him to kick on and go and actually have a what we hope is going to be a productive season, or at least up until January if he does, potentially get his move. But you're right, it's he's in the shop window, right, in essence now. So
it's almost like he's coming on as a sub 3 times in that game. Well, maybe not 3 times because he's on the park already, but then you're having to recalibrate yourself within the game, and folk will be like, "Oh, well, he should be able to do that. He's a professional football player. He's getting paid thousands of pounds a week." Okay, fine. So if you're in your job and you suddenly have to pivot in your job and do something completely different, are you going to be brilliant at it straight away? No, probably take you a bit of time to get the hang of it, and then obviously with a couple of days, maybe you'd be all right. But he's had to do it in game when there's pressure, and he's obviously, his head might still not be completely attuned to where he's at. So I totally feel. I think if you're having any sort of harsh thoughts towards Daizen Maeda about lack of commitment or questionable attitude or anything like that, then I think certainly the majority of people, and like you said, the outpouring of adoration for him when he scored the goal testifies to the fact that people are not anti Daizen Maeda because they completely sympathise with the situation that he's found himself in. I spoke about it with Paul ages ago before it was released that he'd sort of intimated that he wanted to leave, and I was kind of like, well, this kind of is the optimum time for us to sell a player like Daizen Maeda and maximise the money on him. Obviously, I didn't want him to go, but I said at the time, this is about 2 months ago, if Daizen Maeda wants to go, then we should probably facilitate that. But then you look at the absolute miserable failure to have suitable replacements or have any replacements lined up, then of course that then puts us in a difficult position. But it's a position that's self-inflicted. It's not. If you're being told at the end of February, as the manager said, that a player, I mean, I'm sorry, but that's a reasonable amount of time to expect you to get your affairs in order to be able to go into the transfer market and sell and replace. Because if people did see that Daizen Maeda leave in August or July or whenever it would have been, you could definitely stomach it if there's someone coming in who has was highly rated and we're spending a bit of money on, say, I don't know, 6 million. We're not looking for 15, 20 million signings. Nobody is banging the drum for that. But, you know, there are players out there. It's this myth that seems to permeate. And certainly from what I've heard from Paul about the meeting on Monday, that there's all these difficulties that lie in the way to provide barriers for us to be able to sign players, and European tax laws and things like that. You're like, come on, man.
I mean, for me, the biggest indictment of that type of response is the fact that you look at clubs all around us, clubs of a similar profile, clubs of a similar sort of European standing, if you like, clubs with similar resources, and they got their business done by and large. You know, these issues cannot be solely focused around Celtic Football Club. You know, there should be issues that every club face in terms of the recruitment. I appreciate there'll be some, you know, different ends of the spectrum for certain clubs with their resources and such. But the fact is, you know, Celtic are not the only club going for new players or having to adjust their squad or you know, plan for the future. And for me, it just doesn't ring true to say that we made all these challenges we face. Well, surely it's your job to anticipate these challenges and find a way to try and overcome them. And with the greatest respect, you don't start planning your recruitment at the start of the window. You should be doing that months, if not years in advance. You know, by the time one window ends, if you're, you know, part of the recruitment team, if you're the, you know, director of football operations, if you're the CEO, whoever it is that's got this responsibility, that's when you start planning and you start putting your process in place. And, you know, if there's players that are going to move out the club as part of that process, you make sure that there's a you know, you've got that crossover period where, okay, one can go here, but that's the point where we need to get 2 or 3 or whoever is in to replace that position. And we're not talking about, you know, supplementing the squad here. We're not talking about players who are coming in to be second or third choice. We were talking about our first choice right winger, for example, when Kuhn went out. You know, we didn't have anyone to step into that position. So you're losing the goals and the assists of Kuhn. People can say what they like about his attitude towards the end or his performances, but the fact is that he contributed hugely to the team last season. And you know, if you're letting that go, if you're prepared to let that go, you have to be in a position to confidently say, we've got our player lined up to come in. And surely you don't do that after what is the biggest game of your season, you know, which is qualifying for the Champions League, which from a football and a revenue generation perspective, so, you know, ticks both boxes. That was huge. That was huge. So you go in there either as strong or stronger than you did previously. That's the frustration.
I think that whole episode is hanging over us as a club and a support right now, and the way that it's been dismissed by the hierarchy. That is all that it impacted probably the Braga game, I would say, in terms of the atmosphere. Everyone's kind of like, yeah, this is all right. I mean, but and I got stick for saying a few weeks ago that I'd picked up my European package. There was people going, effectively calling me a scab in the comments, you know, without going that far. But as I maintained afterwards, there was no fans collective at that point, as far as I can remember. And even if there was, and it was in its embryonic stage, they hadn't made a call to say, right, nobody buy the European packages. It's like people sporadically saying in the comments, oh, I'm not buying any more merch. I mean, I have actually taken that stance anyway. Never mind the fact that I've got no money to spend on merch, regardless. But if there's a strategic, targeted process that is put forward by the collective, which would involve a boycott or some sort of boycott of the European Games, ticket or no ticket, I'm all in. Count me in. I'll watch it at home. I've got no qualms about doing that. I bought my tickets because I wanted to go to the games. I go to the games. You alluded to that at the start. I go to the games. So why would I just sort of stubbornly go, oh, well, I'm not giving them the money? And I respect people's opinion. I respect people's decision to do that. However, I don't think I should be then vilified for having done it myself. There was thousands of people at that game the other night in Braga. It wasn't as if there was like 2 men and a dog. You know what I mean? I don't know what the attendance was. Right, okay, fans. Well, yeah, exactly. So
I think that's a really, really pertinent point. Yeah, I think you're right.
But going back to the just sort of the feeling and the mood of everybody, you could feel it at the Braga game. You could feel it was like, you're constantly thinking, oh, here's what you could have had, here's what you could have won. This almost feels like a kind of second prize, and everybody, it's not entitlement, but everybody felt that, a qualifier against a team from Kazakhstan should have been an absolute no-brainer, and something that we could have dealt with easily. So we're in the process of a period of time where we're trying to get momentum off the back of that, and I think the Motherwell game on Sunday, despite its late nature in terms of the win, our nearest rivals won very late in the day on Saturday night to get their victory. So I'm not having it that it's something that we should be like, oh well, we only won in the last minute. It's like, well, we won. We won a pretty important game against a pretty decent Motherwell side. And as we all said at the start of the season, there's a lot of sides have improved this season, and there's one that's regressed massively. But the other sides, your Hibs, Hearts, Dundee United, Aberdeen, starting to show a bit of form now. Maybe they're going to pull themselves out of the slump after a decent European performance and then a big victory at home. They've got decent players. Your man Carlson, my mate James is a big Aberdeen fan, and he's raving about him and others for them. So and he could see what they are trying to do, in terms of trying to create a style of play or whatever it is, or are they putting in the effort? And I think he was genuinely worried that maybe they would pull the trigger on Jimmy Tillene after the home defeat, maybe about 2 weeks ago.
It was definitely under a bit of pressure, I think. Yeah.
I mean, there's absolutely no doubt about it. It was, but you're talking about a guy that won them a trophy last season. To be easily disposing of somebody like him who's got them to a final in the first place and then won it, I think that would have been incredibly harsh. So anyway, back to the development of the other clubs. We took care of Motherwell on Sunday, and I think in terms of a tick box exercise, the massive thing is getting the 3 points. The other massive thing is Daizen Maeda scoring the winner. Yep. The other massive thing is Engels and Balikwisha playing a part, because that could just lift them a level or two for the next time we play. Obviously, it's Dundee away a week on Sunday. And we need everybody. We need everybody. We can't just be relying on the first 11. You need everybody to be invested. You need everybody to feel like they're wanted. I mean, I've been a bit critical of Negren. I was really annoyed with him with the whole ear cupping thing. I was like, mate, you've just...
that was highlighted to me after the game, actually. Again, because I was at the other end when he scored, I didn't catch that element of the celebration. Somebody's pointed out that he seems to do this after every celebration, but I think it's maybe a case of that's the optics of that are not going to go down too well with the supporters.
You're equalising against Motherwell. You're picking the ball out the net and you run back to the halfway line with your teeth gritted and ready to go again. You're not going, oh, let's hear it. Let's hear it. I mean, just cool your jets. He's not done enough to be able to do that, I don't think, yet. You've got to earn the kind of trust and the respect of supporters a wee bit. There's no doubt about it. He's a good player. I think the goals at the early part of the season maybe flattered to deceive a little bit in terms of like, all right, we've got ourselves another Matt O'Reilly or something like that. And at this moment in time, he's very, very far away from being Matt O'Reilly. But Matt O'Reilly wasn't the Matt O'Reilly that left at the very start of his Celtic career. He was finely tuned over a course of 2.5 to 3 years. And now we see Marseille getting the benefit of that because they are playing him every week, which is what he didn't get at Brighton. I obviously know that he got the injury which hampered him, but he's starting in Champions League games against Ajax, against Real Madrid. They won against PSG at home. That's the player that we developed, and there's no reason that we can't develop if it's Negren or whoever else, Balikwisha, I don't know. But I think everybody needs to feel like they're fighting the same fight, and I definitely think that Sunday's result with those players contributing will help that feeling going forward, because it does feel like we're still in a bit of a funk about the whole thing, and Monday's meeting, which you'll have heard bits and bobs about it as well, and the general feeling that came from that shows that funk is not shared by those. No. Everything's okay. Never mind the burning building behind us. That's all good. We've got a tiny little fire extinguisher here that we're gently putting it out with.
Yeah. Always reminds me of that meme, that the scene from Naked Gun, I think it was Leslie Nielsen. He's standing there, and everything's exploding behind him. He's like, "There's nothing to see here. Nothing to see here." That was the impression I got from the bits and bobs of the statements that have come out, particularly for the club. I think that one of the, and we'll carry on with this topic in a moment, but I think one of the biggest observations, if you like, that have come out is just this misalignment of this complete misalignment between the impressions that those representing the collective came out with versus what the club then subsequently put out. And I know we've not seen the joint minutes yet, so we've not seen the formal release information, so we'll not.
It'll be interesting.
It'll be really interesting to hear what comes out of that. But there's a couple of things which have caused a bit of concern from the information that has been released. One of which that I'll talk about just now. Now, part of the follow-up statement that came from Celtic Park and also kind of augmented by some of the observations that did come out, albeit they were released in a very unprofessional manner earlier than they should have been, but was that the investigation into a senior Celtic official, I just want to make sure I use the right terminology, but a senior Celtic official who allegedly spoke to Roger Hannah at the Sun newspaper, who subsequently then penned an article about 5 weeks ago, talking about our manager trying to work his ticket, work out, being a disruptive influence. I'm paraphrasing, so I don't have the exact transcript. But ultimately, very, very damaging article coming out in a publication that I've got not a lot of good things to say about. But the manager then comes out afterwards and says it's a cowardly act, I think was the term that he used. That seems to reinforce the fact that there's been some sort of betrayal within the club. I think after that, there was a very short response to a question which said, look, it's done, investigation's over. Those words apparently were echoed by the CEO, Michael Nicholson, to say the investigation's been done, but the impression is that they just went round a bunch of officials and asked, was it you? And they doubled down and said no, which for me is not an investigation. That's nonsense.
It's a Shaggy single from the 90s.
Yeah, it wasn't me. Absolutely. But since then there was Roger Hannah appeared on Super Scoreboard, so Clyde One Super Scoreboard the other night, and was asked directly by a caller about that, and he has basically indicated, look, it's not been challenged by the club or anyone. I'm not going to didn't reveal his source, which is understandable. But he essentially doubled down on the fact that a senior Celtic official has given information on this, and that his view is that the situation has been resolved internally, but they haven't challenged the article, they haven't challenged the validity of what he reported, and I think that's a real failing, and that's something that's going to come back to bite. Our CEO is that it's going to continue to drive a wedge between those who are very much on the manager's side and the bulk of the supporters who are against the club, and these very siloed, insular hierarchy figures at the club who seem to be completely out of touch with everything else that's going on. I
mean, it's a nonsense as far as I'm concerned, and as Paul said yesterday, I can't remember the word he used. It was either murky or mucky, I can't remember, but he basically said it was very unsavoury is what I would add into it. The mere fact that we're associated with a tabloid paper, well, never mind it being that particular tabloid paper, but the mere fact that the club's been associated with that, the mere fact that Roger Hannah got to write a piece about that, when you just would expect that things like that, or even if it was true, which obviously isn't, because if Rodgers is working his ticket, he's doing a really bad job of it. He's been in front of the camera several times saying, I will see out my contract here. So why on earth he would be working his ticket? I would like somebody to explain that to me, because he would look pretty foolish if he was working his ticket whilst also saying that. And I don't think Brendan Rodgers would make any kind of would have any want to damage his reputation. He came back to repair it and has rewarded us with 2 doubles and a European campaign last season that threatened to topple one of the big guns. But for some really classic Celtic European goal to concede in the dying embers of the game, and again, everybody kind of thought, well, this season we will build on that. I mean, Paul asked me at the start of the season, maybe before a ball was kicked in competitive football, what did I want to see from this season? And I said, I would like to see us, well, 1, qualify for the Champions League, because at that point I don't think we knew who we were going to get, and 2, match what we did last season, get out of the group stage. I didn't at any point say, oh, we should be looking to get to the quarterfinals or anything like that. You need to walk before you can run. And I just was looking at, well, I would see progress as being able to get out of the group, able to get to that next round. If we get a big gun and we get knocked out, as long as we don't get humiliated, I would accept that. I would totally accept that, because that is incremental process. To not spend the money and not even get into the competition is absurd, absolutely absurd. It's left me and countless other thousands, potentially millions of fans feeling completely disenfranchised. And I don't know how anybody from the club could watch us talking about this, if they are indeed watching. Good afternoon.
Hi.
I don't know how anybody from the club could watch this and be like, I didn't get what they're talking about. I didn't understand that. I mean, what did they expect from us? I mean, we had a team good enough to play. No, you didn't. You had a team whose forward line, 2 of them were out the door, practically. 2 of them were out the door. Yang's not even been in squads for the last couple of weeks. God knows what's gone through his mind. I mean, I've never been a big champion of the guy, but ultimately that's why we were in place to sell him, because he's not been good enough for Celtic. Doesn't mean he's not good enough to play football somewhere else. And maybe get a consistent run in a different side with different tactics, with a different manager, and then he could turn around and give that to me and be like, well, I'm actually a better player than I was at Celtic. But we've not got the space to let somebody develop that's not got the minerals. People can say, oh, well, you're prepared to give time to Balak, Wisha and Engels. I've seen enough from Engels last season to know that he's not somebody that we should just be dismissing or being like, sell him at the highest bidder, or go cut our losses, take 5 million for him and just get rid of him. If you're actually thinking like that, having seen what he did last season, then I don't know what to say to you. I've got no idea. But going back to the whole situation with the meeting and everything else, everybody feels just very, very far away from the club right now. And the Sun article thing with Brendan Rodgers just mystifies me. Like, as was rightly pointed out in the show yesterday by your man Martin that was on, who said that they waste no time in finding out the culprits of pyrotechnics or whatever else. Investigations are thoroughly done in terms of finding the bad guy in those situations. I mean, bad, quote unquote. But in this situation, it's just a case of round robin in a room. Oh, it was none of yous. All right, okay, fine.
It's not an investigation, is it? It's just we'll check a box here and that's it. Which I just think is very, very, very poor. And you think about it. I mean, you apply that situation to any other organisation, and you're saying, it's one that largely depends on its reputation. And you say that is bringing our organisation into disrepute. That is a code of conduct violation. You went out there and you did something that damages the image of our organisation, or in this case, our football club. That's normally massive disciplinary issue. It's not a case of sitting down and having a chat and saying, right, that was bad, don't do that again. That's a case of saying you have absolutely brought this club into disrepute. You have undermined the manager, you have alienated the support, you have tarnished the image of the club by associating with that particular publication for obvious reasons. That's something that for me can't be brushed under the carpet, or can't just be saying, we're fine with it, it's done now. So I think there's
or point to the manager to say, "Oh well, did he not say something in an interview that it was closed?"
Yeah, exactly. You know, the whataboutery, as it were.
That's absolute whataboutery. It's just like, well, no, but we've asked for answers on this, and we expect answers because you've brought dirty laundry into the public, and wrong dirty laundry, I may add.
Yes.
That it's that this, like I said, just unsavoury, and it was absolutely unnecessary, and not at all what we needed. And I don't know who it was. The inference is that it was because of this constant sort of chatter that Peter Lawwell and Brendan Rodgers don't get on, ergo it must be him. It's like we don't know that for a fact.
No,
but the fact is that Roger Hanna has doubled down and said there was a Celtic official or a Celtic source or whatever name you want to give to it. It wasn't somebody that was serving pies on Sunday that gave this information.
Yeah. He said a senior Celtic
pies, by the way, but they're not privy to the knowledge that this article has generated, or that has been generated by this article. This is someone at the highest, up in the highest echelons of the club that has done this. So why wouldn't there be an investigation, and why wouldn't there be a dismissal? I don't care if it's a public dismissal or a private dismissal, but some sort of reference to it, be like, yep, person was dismissed. We found out it was the person's unnamed. We agree that sort of thing should not be happening. Just the same way as like the person a person either got sacked or got into trouble for the document that was found in a bin. Remember the transfer?
That's right. Yeah.
Like, I'm pretty sure they said at the time that person had been either disciplined or fired. I don't know. I can't really remember. It was a while ago, but that was small fry compared to this. This is questioning the manager's character, his commitment, and I don't think anybody. I mean, Brendan Rodgers right now is working under circumstances that. I mean, if we're frustrated as fans, how frustrated is he as a manager?
I think that's a perspective I think that sometimes gets overlooked, is the fact that, look, the manager's job ultimately is to go and win football matches, but he's doing it under conditions that I don't think any of us anticipated that he'd be under. Certainly when he came back for his second stint, you felt he was coming back under certain assurances that, the football department and the sort of rest of the operation were in alignment, that he had the people in place that he needed. He was going to, transfer strategy was mentioned in particular. He felt like, that was improved from his previous tenure. But then you have these events that happen. We've spoken about recruitment, the inability to get players in, or certainly get players in time. The fact that the players we have got in didn't appear to be top of our target list, certainly by all optics. You then talk about leaks coming from the club, which undermine the manager, the failure of the club to challenge those publicly. The only person I think that's challenged them has been Brendan Rodgers, has come out and really addressed it. There's been no statement for the club to distance himself from the statement, or to condemn the statement, or to indicate it's false. There was no sort of backing of the manager as such to the best of my knowledge, and all of that, as you say, it erodes the confidence within the support that the people running the club are doing the best job that they should be doing, and that's where the question of capability comes in. Now, as we've said, we can't go into the specifics of items that were discussed. We'll wait for the minutes to come out. But you get the impressions, when you talk to Paul, you get the impressions about the people doing key roles. Now, you mentioned something interesting. You talk about Daizen Maeda, you say you compare Daizen Maeda to any of us in our jobs. If we're shuttled into a role that we're completely unfamiliar with, that's not something you're able to do. It's a little bit like a lawyer getting a CEO job, for example. But the impressions that Paul John had from and he shared on here, so I'm not speaking out of turn, was that his impression is that the characters and the capability that was evidenced by him were not right for the roles that they currently embody at the club. If you're talking to the CEO of Celtic Football Club, you're expecting a certain personality, a certain type of interaction. You're expecting someone who maybe commands the room, has got that degree of authority. And the impression that was given is that wasn't there. And he said it's nothing personal. He said it's purely down to the capability and the role, right? Nobody's going to give me a job flying a plane, right? I'm not equipped to do it. I'm not experienced. I have never done it. I don't want to do it. I'm not the guy you want in the cockpit when you're going your holidays. Why do we have people in roles at Celtic Football Club who don't have the experience, the tenure, the background, and don't seem to have the attributes to do the job? And how can the strategy, they refer to the strategy, both myself and Paul John see as an objective, how can the objective be to be world class when you can't even get the basics of recruitment right?
Well, there was a couple of shows ago. I mean, I've been trying to watch everything, and it's exhausting. By the way, this is all exhausting. Like we should just be talking about our team, and
I know,
you know, I mean, like to be talking about all this, it really tires your brain. Like
so early in a season as well.
You're trying to absorb every bit of information. I mean, I spent about an hour and a half yesterday when I got in from work trying to read all the things that, you know, I was reading Paul's back and forth with some guy on Twitter that thinks he knows the answers to everything, and with interest, you know, because I'm like, who is this guy? And what is it? Is it a real person? Like, I looked back and found a real picture of him in a bar, so like presumably is a real person, but it honestly felt like he was like the Twitter equivalent of the Terminator or something like that. He had just been like programmed to like, I'm going to try and argue with everything, and I'm going to shoot you down. I'm going to try and argue with every single thing you say. Everything I say is right. Everything you say is wrong. And even that was exhausting and draining. I mean, I don't know how Paul had the temperament to be able to compose. And the guy will be watching today because he seems to watch everything. I mean, he's tweeting people left, right, and centre looking for answers, and getting very little response. But anyway, it is exhausting. And just thinking about the Dom, somebody put in the comments about the Dom. A guy wrote a comment and said the Dom Mackay and Ange press conference was embarrassing. Right, and then Paul replied and said, "What was embarrassing about it?" Because I think he'd brought it up in relevance to comparing it to what he experienced on Monday with what he experienced back then. And I thought about it, and I'm like, how was it embarrassing? Like, what about? I don't remember being embarrassed by it. I remember being quite enthused by it, at the fact that somebody had come in, and then if you're wanting answer. I mean, I want answers about the Dominic Mackay tenure as much as I want answers about that goal that we didn't get given last week. I want a detailed explanation. And I know it's been inferred that we're never going to get it, but I want to know what the hell happened there. What did he do wrong? Was it his decision to walk away because of the way that they were, or was it their decision to make him walk away because of the way that he was? Like, what happened there? Because it's a very, very, very odd scenario that played out. The one time that they let someone come in with credentials, the guy's now the CEO of the SEC complex, by the way.
Yeah, so he's clearly well thought of.
He's overseeing the Hydro, the SEC Armadillo, and the SECC. So that's like looking after hundreds of jobs and the responsibility of thousands and thousands of people on a daily basis. It's one of the busiest venues and circuits in Europe, and in fact possibly the world, because if you think about it, there's very rarely a night that there's not something on at the Hydro. So how many people,
responsibility?
How many people are constantly going in and out of that venue? So you don't just get that if you've they've not gone, oh well, you're only in Celtic for however many days, you can't be very good. He's got that job, and he's probably going to get another job after it that's potentially better and bigger. And yet we are still sitting here with the same people that have been there some of them have been there for 15 to 20 years. And yes, they can point to the trophies. Yes, they can point to, but we got Brendan Rodgers. You wouldn't have got Brendan Rodgers without us and all the rest of it. And it's like, yeah, but it's what you do when you get Brendan Rodgers. It's not about getting him. It's about what you do when you get him. It's not, do you know what I mean? And again, answers to questions. The myth that we are having to hear people say, oh, well, it's the managers that signed these players. Daizen Maeda, Inamura, Callum Osmond, Jemai Simpson-Pusey. who signed those players,
Yeah.
and why are they not being played? Because as I said to Paul on the phone yesterday, that's like Brendan Rodgers has asked for specific toys for Christmas, and then on Christmas Day he opens the toys and then puts them in a corner and goes, "I'll just play with these toys that I've had for the last year. I actually didn't really want them. You know, I know you've I know you've spent a lot of money on them, but like actually I'll just put them in the corner." Like, I mean, we haven't spent a lot of money on them, but they're taking up jerseys and they're taking up places in the squad that could have been taken by players that either he did want. And look, see if it comes out at somewhere down the line when Rodgers is long gone that he did sign those players and that he did put his neck on the line for them. I'll stand corrected. I will stand corrected. But at this moment in time, it doesn't look like that's the case, because why on earth would he sign players and then not put them in his European squad? Why is Simpson Pusey nowhere near the first team? And why is he likely going to go back down the road in January as another kind of awkward like loan that didn't work out a la Ali Adair years ago?
Absolutely. It simply doesn't add up. The process doesn't connect. It doesn't connect. The output, whatever they say, we're comfortable with our process, we're comfortable with our strategy. The output isn't working. It's simply not working. And a lot of people use those players that you mentioned as the kind of stick to beat over the manager over the head by saying, well, he was backed. There's 4 players. Yeah, players he clearly didn't want, right? I mean, I think it's a pretty safe assumption that he didn't want the players. Yes, I'm sure he wanted players, just not those ones. They don't fit the profile of what he wanted.
Also, you're not going to tell me that there's an argument to say that he did want them and then they've arrived, he's had a look at them and went, nah.
Yeah. I mean, that in itself would be a huge failure, right? That would be.
Of course it would be. Yeah. Of course it would be, and 100%. I would be like, well, that's on you, Rodgers, if you've done that. But I just don't believe that that's the case. And people might watch this and like, there's people that have it in for Rodgers big time and that want him out and everything else. And you're like, well, what do you want instead? This guy's a really, really, really good manager for Celtic. Has been a really good manager for Celtic. Continues to be a really good manager for Celtic. The players respond to him. And, he did enough last season to open a window into what we could be as a football club. And that was with him at the helm. As I said to somebody in the comments, what were your thoughts at full time at the Munich game last season? What were your thoughts on, did you have your rocket launcher and your M16 out for Brendan Rodgers at that point? No, you didn't. Because you were as disappointed as the rest of us that we'd just been bounced out in the dying seconds of a game in the Champions League, the top level of European competition.
Yeah.
We were putting up a fight. We were
a sense of pride. Yeah.
We were swinging punches, and one of those punches could have landed. I mean, Kuhn scores that goal in the home leg. That's a different tie. It's a different tie, or the goal gets allowed, should I say? It's a different tie, but. I don't get it, but like I said, these answers, it's really, really frustrating to not be able to pick through why the Dominic Mackay thing as a CEO, an actual CEO, was brought in and then mysteriously goes, and it's only in the aftermath of it, which we're like 4 years on from, that we've seen how it's played out since then. That Peter Lawwell comes back as the chairman. It all feels very kind of jobs for the boys, It's and I don't get it. I don't understand it, and it's not been conducive to the club. It's not. I mean, people point to success or trebles and doubles and all the rest of it, but we've done that despite the mismanagement of transfers and lack of investment in certain things. And before you even get to talking about the stadium, I mean, like, how on earth could they watch that stadium video that your man from
Steve will put out? Yeah.
How could they watch that and be like, oh, he's just nitpicking? It's just that. I mean, that He's looking for things. He's looking for things. He doesn't need to look for things. They're staring him in the face. They're staring everybody in the face every single time they go to Celtic Park. You must have seen it when you went on Sunday.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I still think there's a magic to the stadium. I think there's a magic to the Celtic way. But then you actually look at, failing structures. You look at, it looks a bit run down. The paintwork's not great. The facilities aren't brilliant. They still look the same way they did when I was going back in the 90s. And it's like things have to improve. And I've been fortunate. Recent travels, I've been to a few, modern European stadiums. The Bilbao Stadium, for example, incredible. A piece of architecture. Paul John talks about going down to the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium and being blown away, describing it as space age compared to Celtic Park. And again, the frustration for me is there are so many opportunities for the club at the moment to get the support on side, right? I mean, the boards of football clubs are never going to be the most popular, right? That's just the nature of the role. Nobody's ever going to agree with everything you do. The problem is that there's such a lack of communication. There's such a lack of transparency into things that are important to the supporters that come from the club. You've mentioned one there, the stadium and the supporter experience. It's not great, right? It's I hadn't been to a game for a while. Next thing you know, I'm sitting in a cramped seat. Loads of people, the wind and the rain's blowing in my face. And by the way, I loved it, right? That's great. That's football for me. I was a wee boy against.
I don't think you can expect them to change the weather.
That's fine. But I'm just saying, but I'm there. But then I'm looking at, I'm walking down the stairs and I'm looking at all the cracks. I'm looking at the paint coming off. I'm going out the toilets and it's the old blooming urinals with the big steel urinal thing that's just, barely working and half the taps don't work and it's just basic things like that. And the club could come out and say, look, we've got quite a lot of money in the bank. We've got cash reserves. We're going to spend some of those cash reserves. Don't have to go to the granular detail. Don't have to tell us exactly how much or who they're going to. But say we've got a plan to invest some of this money into improving, the facilities at the club. Right. That might mean that we can't maybe have the same level of budget for transfers, but it's for the long-term good of the club and the supporter experience. I think a lot of supporters, not everybody would be happy, but a lot of supporters would say, okay, I can see that. I can see the benefit in doing that. You talk about last season's European progress and the campaign that we had. That should have been the benchmark. You're right. What we should have seen is incremental progress, right? We should have seen a statement towards incremental progress. We say, look, we're very open. We know that certain players will want to move on. We look to maximise our revenue, but our commitment is to bring in equivalent quality and make sure that if we lose that level of quality, we bring in something that's at least the equivalent or better. And we try and maximise our chances of having the same level of achievement as we had in the previous season. You're right, it's always on a forward trajectory, but they don't do that. Then we get the statement released. Club should have come out and said, look, we condemn that in the strongest possible terms. We don't know where this leak has come from. We're doing an investigation, but what we will do is say that's absolutely not the view of the club. The club and the manager are very much aligned. We back the manager. We don't agree with these comments, and fans would have said, okay, so at least they're doing something. At least they're taking some sort of action. But instead, what we get nation state North Korea style silence. Nothing. And then when they do come and speak to us, it's nothing to see here. The old Leslie Nielsen meme. Nothing to see here. Everything's
an honourable mention for Not the View in there. I don't know if you subconsciously mentioned Not the View. You just said. I know. It was just I saw I saw Joe Miller commenting on something, and I can only imagine what those guys are thinking. They went through all this. I mean, I went through it as a wee guy. Like I taped stuff off the telly. I taped the sack the board stuff off the telly and I didn't really know what was going on. I didn't really know why. It was just because it was associated with Celtic that I taped it off the telly. So, whenever I have met Matt McGlone or then we've discovered who Jim Orr is and everything else, like these people are kind of like, oh my God, they're those guys that I saw on the telly when I was a wee guy. But now I understand what they were doing. But like the Not the View guys, they started Not the View in that time. I mean, in 1989, they wrote in one of their magazines, is there anybody out there that can save us from this mess that we're currently in? That was in 1989, and then it happens. Fergus McCann comes in, does what he does, sets us up. And the fact that Fergus set that stadium up in 30 years ago, and now we've not basically done anything to it really since then. I mean, the way I approach the stadium, I come in usually from like where you cross over from the Forge, and I walk down that. I couldn't tell you the name of the street. Does that make me a bad Celtic fan? I don't know.
How dare you?
It's the one that you go past the person that sells the sweets in the table, and there's a couple of burger vans as you're approaching the Jock Stein stand. But what I'm seeing is those banners are still not replaced. Somebody said to me, "Oh, it's because the steel's been treated." I'm like, "We're in the middle of October. It's been like that for months. How on earth can that is more than embarrassing that they've not sorted that out. It really is. I mean, I was prepared to give them the benefit of the doubt on it and be like, all right, well, maybe there is some sort of time frame, but it now just feels like it's almost kind of like a get it up you. Get it up. We're not going to spend anything on this because it's not needed. It's cosmetic. That's what they'll be looking at it as. It's cosmetic. It's just superficial. It's like, well, no, this is our ground. We want to be proud of it. We want to be proud of everything associated with Celtic, whether it's the team, the stadium, the outside of the stadium, the inside of the stadium, the manager. We want to be proud of the people that are representing our football club. Everybody that wears that Celtic badge on a tracksuit or a suit jacket or a tie, whatever, you want to be like, they're sound. They're good guys. They've got Celtic at their best, their best interests. Can't speak. I'm getting too angry. They put Celtic first, and that the song says Celtic first, Celtic last, Celtic overall, and we all funnel money into it. I mean, geez, like close to £800 in a season ticket, and then the European games on top of that, away games on top of that. That's a commitment. That's a financial commitment that we give to the club. And the least you want is the best in return, the best in class, like not all right in class or average in class, the best in class, because that's what I think they aspire. They certainly say they aspire to it. So let's see it. Let's see, what your plans are, and we could maybe be a bit better with our communication. I was going to swear there. Of course you can.
Yes.
Of course you can be better with your communication. We don't know anything about what's happening with the club. And as John Hughes said yesterday, very rightly, they don't want to say anything because it's of accountability. Because there's accountability. As soon as they say something, it's like, well, you said you were going to do that. Where is it?
You'll be held to account. Yeah.
And I was listening to him yesterday, nodding my head, going, that's exactly it. That is it. That's it.
And listen, these views are not restricted to Axom. These are views that are across multiple platforms, multiple channels.
I know, everybody's united.
Every single person, is saying the same thing in some way, shape, or form. There's variations, but this is the thing. There is a real, even if there's not necessarily, we're not 100% unified in terms of what the next stage of action is. We're not necessarily unified in should we protest this way, protest that way. Some people have certain opinions on the board and around the club. But I think that there are elements where almost everyone's saying the same thing. We don't know anything. They are not taking accountability. They are, things need to improve. Lots of things need to improve. And I think that's right. You hear it in almost every single channel. And it probably gets a bit monotonous for people listening to it. They probably think we're being a bit negative. I think you made a good point. You're like, the stress level almost in having to talk about this stuff when all you want to be doing is enjoying the product on the park, enjoying the football. As I said at the start, I've just been at my first game this season. Really privileged to be there. Loved being in amongst the supporters. Really just feeling that energy coming off the guys in the stand and shouting myself hoarse at every missed pass and every chance. Absolutely loved being there. At the same time, I'm looking and thinking, God, do you imagine if we were just run better as a football club? How great this would be, And I know, really, like you said, the commitment the supporters make. To go to games week in, week out, go home, go away, travel far afield. And none of these things are cheap or they all come at a cost. People make huge sacrifices. And you're looking for, you're not looking for people in and the board to go and fall on their swords and say, all we're asking is say, match the commitment. Match the commitment. You're in a position, I wouldn't say a position of power, I say you're in a position of privilege. You represent the upper echelons of our football club. You have got a huge responsibility to the fans and to the supporters. They are the lifeblood of the club. Your responsibility, which you are privileged to be in, for whatever reason, is to represent their requirements, is to represent their passion, their desire for improvement at the football club. That's your job. That's your job. And if that's not happening, you ain't doing your job. And therefore, without calling for anyone to be sacked, I would say, if you can't deliver on that, step aside and let someone else who will. Bring someone in, like maybe a Don Mackay. JP, I could continue talking to you for about another 3 hours. I'm sure, I've really enjoyed listening to that. Apologies, didn't bring up as many comments as I'd hoped to. It's never actually easy.
It's hard to deviate when you get on your soapbox or whatever.
Your soapbox a little bit, yeah.
It's hard to kind of like pivot to comments and everything else. I purposefully don't read the comments while we're on air. I mean, probably just as well I didn't read them last week because there was several that were, to say derogatory is called a joker and everything else. And just on that, I want to say a big thank you to a guy called Jim Ward who sent me a frankly incredible message on Twitter that reduced me to tears. So much so that I just had to reply straight away and say, I just wanted to let you know I've read every word of this and it really means a lot. But it was basically sort of saying, don't let get you down, and it was a really, really lovely thing to say. And he talked a lot about how Axom had got him through a really, really tough time, losing someone close to him. And when you go into the detail of that and you think about, I mean, I know myself, during lockdown and stuff like that, like the Homeboys in particular was one that was like a kind of like friend or group of friends that I didn't know. I've met 3 of them now. One of them I would consider a friend, Scott, who was on the show the other day for the first time. And that got me through a tough time. So to hear that back from someone was very kind of poignant. And so big shout out to Jim Ward on that.
No, I think brilliant. No, well done, Jim. And listen, all these comments, and I think most of them have been subject to a few of these comments. The nice, the positive comments. We sometimes get them privately, we sometimes get them sent via Paul John. And it is a privilege to know that actually you can make a positive impact in people's life, even when you're talking about, sometimes prevalent negativity. But what I would say to everybody that does watch us is, remember, there's about 30 plus contributors on Axom. We've all got different opinions. We have the occasional argument, we have the occasional disagreement, but ultimately we all want the best for Celtic, and we're supporters. So that's the key thing I would mention.
I mean, if you've watched this show today and not thought that me and you want what's best for Celtic, then we're in some way out to try and like make a name for ourselves or anything like that. It's like no, it's just. Yeah. I mean, I've been a Celtic fan since I was a wee guy. It's been my life. It's been a constant in my life, like Paul said. That is, music and football have been the 2 constants in my life. So if I do occasionally talk about music or whatever, then I will deviate slightly because it's such a big part of my life. It's not because I want to make it all about me or anything like that. It's just like talking about music. I spoke to a group of students from a college yesterday for an hour and 15 minutes about Tuts and music industry and gigs and everything else. And the wee guy like totally lost his mind at the fact that My Chemical Romance played Tuts. Like he couldn't believe it. I was like, I went and got the signed show times from that night from a box to show him, and things like that were great. I mean, is that about me? No, I don't think so. I'm just told you about me, a wee guy from a college having an amazing experience. I don't think that's about me. It's about, I don't know. I'm exhausted. I'm completely exhausted.
Quite right. Well, we're at the end there. Just a couple of things that we need to mention. First of all, just say thanks for everybody for tuning in. Nearly 2,000 strong actually for me and JP today. And Paul John will be back as usual tomorrow. I do want to give a wee shout out myself. So I was made aware by someone who watches and follows Axom and messaged me on Twitter. I'll never call it X, Twitter. who is a chap called Darren McDonald. Now, a member of Darren's family, a wee fella called Jacob Walker. He's only 4 years old. He was diagnosed with cancer at 11 months. So his family has certainly been through it, and the wee fella's been through the ringer, as it were. He was looking in better shape, but unfortunately, his condition has worsened, and he's now in need of a bone marrow treatment. I don't know too many specifics. I don't want to say anything too intrusive, but what we would ask is that Darren is trying to raise awareness and potentially looking for some support to get some fundraising set up to support wee Jacob and his family. If anyone can help, it's Darren McDonald. That's McDonnell. He is on X. If you can't reach him, or if you're not on X or Twitter, you can come to me and I'll put you guys in touch. So it's just about, he's just looking for a little bit of support, a little bit of awareness. So I said I would give him a shout out. The wee fella's a huge Celtic fan. I was fortunate enough to see a wee picture of him from his family today on the hospital bed. But he's got the full Celtic kit on, and he's sitting there and he's wearing it very proudly and very well. But 4 years old, and going through a hell of a rough time. And so that's one of the privileges of having this platform, is we can give him a wee shout out and hopefully do what we can to lend a wee bit of support. So yeah, that's if you can help Darren, we'd greatly appreciate it. So thank you for that. Anyway, it's been a fantastic Thursday. I've really enjoyed that discussion. I know some people will moan that we're kind of talking about the stuff behind the scenes, but this is the prevalent story at the moment, JP. So I think we have to cover it, and we do all have different opinions on it. So hopefully that was a decent hour for people watching. All that's left for me to say is, JP Mason, thanks again, sir. Really appreciate having you on, and thank you everyone for tuning in to A Celtic State of Mind.